Hello, everyone. Today we'll start talking about, we'll talk about Roos's contribution to cosmic origins in the beginning. And as we've seen before, Roos is an atheist. He thinks there's no God, there's no intelligible ground for the universe. He's an agnostic or a skeptic in many ways about things outside of science. So he's very worried, or at least he thinks that we cannot really know that much outside of scientific enterprise. And he's also an anti-realist about science itself. He thinks that science, the kind of results that come from science, they're not really knowledge in the realist sense and the Peterson sense of theories that adequately describe the way the world is. He thinks that that's the adequately describing the way the world is essentially and is kind of undoable for human beings. We're necessarily trapped in our own perspectives, our own culture, and so on. So we can't quite know the world in any robust sense. Science is the best way of going about knowing, but even there is a limited, grounded in metaphor. So the kind of knowledge we have from science, it's not the realist sense, it's something else. So because of those commitments, Roos doesn't really have a lot to say. He thinks that there's really not a lot to be said about questions about the cosmic origin in the beginning. Here are the few things he does say. He doesn't, argue for them too much because he has this non-committal attitude towards them. So after briefly laying out some of the basic facts, scientist facts about Big Bang cosmology, Roos continues. So what has any of this to do with the Christian religion, or indeed with any position or religion positing a creator, God? On one level, I want to say nothing at all. I see no reason why you should not go on doing science without bringing God into the discussion. Stay with methodological naturalism and keep going. The fact that you do not have all the answers yet is no good reason to give up. And notice the way in which he's describing thinking that God is the best explanation for why the world is the way it is. He's describing that as giving up. And it's crucial that it's giving up in the scientist's sense of giving up. It is not trying to provide a purely naturalistic explanation of some phenomena. It is explicitly appealing to some non-naturalistic explanation, a supernatural explanation. So it's giving up in the sense of science giving up, right? It's a understanding a question or the answer to a question being beyond the realm of science. So what Roos is in fact saying is, well, given that science is the best way we have for going about trying to investigate reality, we should just keep going and going and going until we have good grounds for thinking that there's no longer a good answer. And we haven't quite reached there. So let's not appeal to God into that's our last resort kind of a response. So keep staying with science, and we don't know the answers. That's the attitude we should take, says Roos. He doesn't quite explicitly say this here, but I said it for him, right? He's deeply skeptical of any non-scientific approach to reality. Even in science itself is not that impressive. Science itself only provides us with metaphors. Other approaches are even less epistemologically satisfying, he thinks. So there's not a lot to be said about cosmic origins. What about the fine-tuned universe? Here's what Pete Roos says in reply. I confess that at its best, and is rarely ever in such a state, I find this argument singularly unconvincing. This is because you're arguing from a datum of one observable universe. So Roos is not convinced. Why is he not convinced? Because one of the crucial consideration for something counting as scientific is its repeatability. In the way in which scientists go about putting forth the observation, the fine-tuned observation, or the weak anthropic principle observation, is not by doing repeatable experiments, right? It's the fact that they make a mathematical model, they put numbers into a model, and they vary the model. So it's all done in the computer, in the mathematical model. It's not actual observations of the real world. There's just the one universe, the one we inhabit. And because that part of the scientific way of normally doing things is lacking, Roos himself is skeptical of the credibility of the results of what the scientists are doing here. How can anyone, says Roos, really know what the world could have or could have not been like? We just know the world as it is, and to stipulate about how it could have been otherwise if the force of gravity were slightly weaker or stronger. those are just beyond our knowledge. Thanks, Roos. It's important to note, though, that Roos himself is disagreeing here with scientists about what scientists think science is doing. So when scientists put forth these observations about the world being fine-tuned, they think they're doing science, right? So Roos is pointing to scientists and saying, you're not doing science well. It is crucial to see that, right? He's, despite the fact he's a great champion of science, he's comfortable disagreeing with scientists about what science itself is. Peterson may question the authenticity or the legitimacy of Roos's move here, thinking that it might be a way of holding on to his atheism unjustifiably, and it would be a violation of one of the rules of fair engagement. It's not entirely clear what to make of this, but it's crucial to flag it. And Roos continues, if there is anything to multiverses is a hypothesis that tries to deal with the fact that the universes are fine-tuned by postulating an infinite amount of universes that are interconnected in different intricate ways, and such that for every possible value of a physical constant, there is an actual physical universe that has that value. And all of the possible ways in which the physical values can manifest themselves, do manifest themselves in one of these universes. And if that's the case, then of course one of them is going to be, or some of them are going to be conducive to life, and we happen to be in one of those. There's nothing surprising there. So if there is not just the one universe, but a multiplicity of universes that are connected in these ways, then there is no puzzle. There need not be no creator that organizes everything, because someone has to head it. Given an infinite amount of tries, and there were, so someone had it, namely us. What's yet the target of being life conducive? So that's a theory that people have out there. Roos doesn't endorse it as such, but he thinks, maybe there's something there. But it's crucial to see the non-committal way with which he talks about multiverses as well. As far as Roos is concerned, that kind of discussion, even though it sounds sciencey, it also seems to have crossed a line beyond real science or true science, or it's not as credible as other more scientific discoveries. So what about the fundamental question, why is there something rather than nothing, right? That's at the heart of the Kalam cosmological argument. Here's what Roos says. I do not think science can give you an answer to that question, of why there's something rather than nothing, right? That's beyond the metaphor of the machine that shapes the very dialogue or discourse that is scientific. The machine metaphors makes this question unanswerable. You don't ask about the origin of the machine. The machine metaphor does not allow for that question, only about the inner functioning of the machine. So what Roos has to offer is skepticism about we don't know answers to these things. The question now is, why should you go with my skepticism, claims Roos. I don't know the answer to these questions. Rather than the theological affirmation of God, rather than Peterson. Here's the question for you guys. Here's the question for us observers of Peterson and Roos. Which view is the better view? The one that Peterson puts forth, God as the best explanation, or Roos, the one that says, well, actually, we don't know any of this. What's more credible, skepticism, Roos, or God as the best explanation, Peterson? Here's what Roos says. Surely the Christian answer is more satisfying in a way than the skeptic answers. There's something satisfactory about having a positive answer than just, than just not knowing. He agrees, he recognizes that, but that does not mean that it's satisfactory. Unfortunately, Roos does not elaborate on what this means, but it's clear that he thinks that appealing to God as the best explanation just won't do, but he doesn't tell us why. And that's pretty much it. Roos doesn't really have a lot more to say. Again, he thinks there's not a lot to say, so it's consistent with his skepticism, atheism, and anti-realism that he doesn't have a lot to say, precisely because he thinks there's not a lot of truth to be attained here. So why bother trying to say something that is unsayable or cannot really know? And that's it. That's all Roos has. I'll see you next time.